My world has been turned upside down, and I am not sure where else to turn. I am a 35-year-old man, married to Candy for the last 7 years. We met in grad school, fell in love, and I thought we had everything figured out. Candy has always been driven and ambitious. She landed a job as a university professor right after getting her PhD, and I could not have been prouder. But lately, things have felt off. Candy has been working late more often, canceling our date nights, and generally seems distracted when we are together. I chalked it up to stress from her job, but something in my gut told me there was more to it. Little did I know, I was about to stumble into a nightmare that would shatter everything I thought I knew about our marriage. It all started last Tuesday. I decided to surprise Candy by bringing her favorite takeout to her office for dinner. We had not had a proper meal together in weeks, and I figured this gesture might help us reconnect. As I approached her office door, I heard muffled laughter, Candy's unmistakable giggle mixed with a deeper, masculine chuckle. My hand froze on the doorknob. Something felt wrong. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open, only to be confronted with a scene that will be seared into my memory forever. There was Candy, my wife, straddling one of her students on her office chair, both partially undressed, lips locked, hands all over each other. The takeout bag slipped from my fingers, hitting the floor with a thud that finally alerted them to my presence. The look on Candy's face when she saw me, shock, guilt, and then annoyance. It was like she was more upset about being interrupted than being caught. The student, some young hotshot named Brad, scrambled to pull up his pants while Candy just sat there, staring at me with cold eyes I had never seen before. "What the hell, Candy?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was deafening. Candy slowly stood up, straightening her blouse with an eerie calmness. "Mark, this is not what it looks like," she said, her tone disturbingly casual. I could not believe my ears. "Not what it looks like? Are you kidding me right now?" I was shouting at this point, my shock quickly turning to rage. Brad mumbled something about leaving and tried to squeeze past me. I grabbed his arm hard. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded, looking between him and Candy. Candy rolled her eyes. "Mark, you are overreacting. Brad and I were just discussing his thesis." "With your clothes off?" I shot back, incredulous at her attempt to lie her way out of this. Brad yanked his arm free and bolted out the door, leaving me alone with Candy and the weight of her betrayal. She crossed her arms, looking more annoyed than remorseful. "We should talk about this at home," she said coolly. "Not here." I stood there, stunned by her audacity. This was not the woman I married. Who was this person standing in front of me, so casually dismissing the fact that she had just shattered our entire relationship? I left Candy's office in a daze, my mind reeling. The drive home was a blur. I am not even sure how I made it without crashing. When I got to our house, I just sat in the driveway, engine off, staring blankly at the garage door. About an hour later, Candy's car pulled up. She got out and walked towards me, her face a mask of irritation rather than remorse. I got out of my car, my legs feeling like jelly. "Are you done with your tantrum?" she asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "Can we talk like adults now?" I could not believe what I was hearing. "Tantrum? Candy, I just caught you with your student. How can you be so cold about this?" She sighed dramatically. "Mark, you are blowing this way out of proportion. It was just a momentary lapse in judgment. It did not mean anything." I felt like I was going crazy. Was she really trying to downplay what I had seen? A momentary lapse? How long has this been going on, Candy? And how many others have there been? Her eyes narrowed. "That is none of your business," she snapped. In that moment, I realized this was not just a one-time thing. The woman I thought I knew was a complete stranger to me. "None of my business?" I echoed, my voice rising. "You're my wife, Candy. Everything about our relationship is my business." She rolled her eyes again, a gesture that was quickly becoming infuriating. "Oh, grow up, Mark. We're adults. Sometimes people have needs that cannot be met by just one person." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. So what? I'm not enough for you. Is that what you're saying? Candy's face softened slightly, but there was still no real remorse there. Look, it's not about you, okay? It's just exciting. The thrill of it all. You would not understand. You're right. I don't understand, I said, my anger giving way to a deep, aching sadness. I don't understand how you could do this to us, to our marriage. She scoffed. Our marriage? Please. We've been going through the motions for years. Don't act like everything was perfect before this. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Had I been blind to the problems in our relationship? Or was she just trying to justify her actions? Either way, I felt lost, hurt, and completely blindsided by this woman I thought I knew better than anyone else in the world. We stood there in the driveway, the tension between us palpable. I struggled to process everything she was saying. How could she be so cavalier about destroying our marriage? So what now, Candy? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You just expect me to forget what I saw and move on like nothing happened? She shrugged, her indifference cutting deeper than any knife. Honestly, Mark, I think you're overreacting. It's just sex. It does not have to mean anything. I could not believe what I was hearing. Just sex? Candy, you were with your student. Do you have any idea how unethical that is? You could lose your job over this. For the first time, a flicker of concern crossed her face. You would not dare tell anyone, she hissed, her eyes narrowing. If you breathe a word of this to the university, I will make sure you regret it. I was taken aback by her threat. Are you seriously threatening me right now? I asked, incredulous. She took a step closer, her voice low and menacing. I am just telling you how things are going to be. You are going to keep your mouth shut, and we are going to move past this. Understood? In that moment, I realized that the Candy I loved was long gone, if she had ever existed at all. I took a step back, physically and emotionally distancing myself from this stranger wearing my wife's face. No, Candy, I don't understand, and I sure as hell do not agree to your terms. Her face contorted with anger. You don't have a choice, Mark. Think about it. Who do you think they will believe? The respected professor or her jealous, paranoid husband? The realization hit me like a freight train. She was right. Without concrete evidence, it would be her word against mine. And with her reputation at the university, she held all the cards. So that's it? I asked, my voice cracking. You cheat on me, threaten me, and I am just supposed to roll over and take it? Candy's expression softened slightly, but there was still no real remorse there. Look, Mark, I am not the villain here. Relationships evolve, people change. Maybe if you weren't so boring and predictable, I would not have had to look elsewhere for excitement. Her words stung, each one a dagger to my heart. I could not believe she was trying to pin this on me. Don't you dare try to blame me for your choices, Candy. You are the one who broke our vows, not me. She laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that sent chills down my spine. Vows. Grow up, Mark. This isn't some fairy tale. Welcome to the real world. I felt like I was drowning, suffocating under the weight of Candy's callousness and betrayal. I needed to get away to clear my head and figure out what to do next. I can't do this right now, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I need some space. Candy shrugged, her indifference cutting deeper than her words. Fine, go sulk if you need to. Just remember what I said about keeping your mouth shut. I turned away from her, unable to look at her face any longer. As I walked towards my car, she called out, Oh, and Mark, don't bother coming home tonight. I have some grading to do. The implication was clear, and it made me sick to my stomach. I got in my car and drove off, no destination in mind, just needing to put as much distance between myself and Candy as possible. As I drove aimlessly through the city, my mind raced. How had I missed the signs? Were there signs at all, or had Candy just become an expert at deception? And what was I supposed to do now? I ended up at a dingy motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where nobody asks questions. As I lay on the lumpy bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, I realized that my life as I knew it was over. The question was, what would rise from the ashes of my shattered marriage? I barely slept that night, tossing and turning on the uncomfortable motel bed. By morning, I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. But I knew I could not hide forever. I needed to face this head-on. I drove back to our house, half expecting Candy to be gone, but her car was still in the driveway. Taking a deep breath, I walked in. The scene that greeted me was surreal. Candy was sitting at the kitchen table, calmly sipping coffee and grading papers as if nothing had happened. She looked up when I entered, her expression neutral. "Oh, you're back," she said, her tone casual. "There's coffee if you want some." I stood there, dumbfounded. "Coffee? Really, Candy? That's all you have to say?" She sighed, putting down her red pen. "What do you want me to say, Mark? I told you it's not a big deal. Can we just move past this?" Her nonchalance ignited my anger anew. "Move past this? You cheated on me, Candy, with your student. How am I supposed to just move past that?" She rolled her eyes, a gesture I was growing to hate. "It was just sex, Mark. It didn't mean anything. Why are you being so dramatic about this?" I could not believe what I was hearing. It was like we were living in two completely different realities. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Candy, this isn't just about the sex. It's about trust, respect, our entire relationship. You've broken all of that." She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Oh, please, Mark, don't be so old-fashioned. Monogamy is an outdated concept anyway. Maybe this is an opportunity for us to explore new possibilities." I felt my jaw drop. "Are you seriously suggesting we open our marriage right now, after I caught you cheating?" Candy shrugged, a sly smile playing on her lips. "Why not? It could spice things up. Lord knows we need it." Her words hit me like a slap in the face. "Is that what this is about? You're bored with me?" "Well," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "You have to admit, Mark, you're not exactly Mr. Excitement. Always so predictable, so safe." I could not believe what I was hearing. It was like every insecurity I had ever had was being confirmed by the one person I thought would never hurt me. "So instead of talking to me about it, you decide to screw your students?" I asked, my voice rising. "How many, Candy? How many others have there been?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Does it really matter? What's done is done. The question is, what are we going to do now?" I stood there, staring at this woman who looked like my wife but was acting like a complete stranger. I realized then that I had a big decision to make. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, teetering between the life I thought I had and an uncertain future. Candy's casual dismissal of our entire relationship was like a punch to the gut. "What are we going to do now?" I echoed her words, my voice hollow. "I don't even know who you are anymore, Candy. The woman I married would never have done this." She laughed, a harsh sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, grow up, Mark. People change. Maybe this is who I've always been, and you've just been too blind to see it." Her words stung, but they also sparked something in me, a realization that had been building since I first saw her with Brad in her office. "You know what, Candy? You're right. I have been blind. Blind to the fact that you're not the person I fell in love with anymore. Maybe you never were." For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, surprise, maybe even a hint of fear. "What are you saying, Mark?" she asked, her voice losing some of its earlier confidence. I stood up straighter, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "I'm saying I'm done. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with finality. Candy's face cycled through a range of emotions, shock, anger, and finally, a cold calculation that sent chills down my spine. "A divorce," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Are you sure you want to do that, Mark? Remember what I said about keeping quiet? If you try to divorce me, I'll make sure you lose everything." Her threat hung in the air, but instead of intimidating me, it only strengthened my resolve. I was done being manipulated by her. You know what, Candy? Go ahead, try to take everything, but think about it. How do you think the university will react when they find out you've been sleeping with your students? Multiple students, apparently. Even if I can't prove it, the mere accusation would be enough to launch an investigation. Candy's face paled slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. You wouldn't dare. It's your word against mine, and I'm a respected professor. I laughed bitterly. A respected professor who sleeps with her students. I wonder how many of them would come forward if an investigation started. And let's not forget about Brad. Do you really think he'd lie for you if his own academic future was on the line? For the first time, I saw real fear in Candy's eyes. She had not expected me to fight back. You're bluffing, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I shook my head. I'm not. I'd rather lose everything than stay in this sham of a marriage. So here's what's going to happen. We're getting a divorce, and we're going to do it quietly and fairly. Or I can make a few phone calls, and we can see how it all plays out publicly. Your choice, Candy. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I could almost see the wheels turning in her head as she realized the position she was in. Candy's facade finally cracked. The cool, collected demeanor she had been maintaining crumbled, replaced by a mix of anger and desperation. You can't do this to me, Mark, she hissed, her voice trembling. Everything I've worked for, you would ruin it all. I felt a twinge of sadness, but it was overshadowed by my determination. I'm not the one who ruined things, Candy. You did that when you decided to cheat. She slumped in her chair, the fight seeming to drain out of her. Fine, she muttered. We'll do it your way. A quiet divorce. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and sorrow. You'll contact a lawyer tomorrow. We'll split everything 50-50. No contests. As I turned to leave the kitchen, Candy spoke again, her voice small and vulnerable for the first time since this all began. Was I really that bad of a wife, Mark? I paused, considering her question. Part of me wanted to lash out, to hurt her as she had hurt me, but I realized that would not solve anything. No, Candy, I said softly. We had good times, but somewhere along the way, we lost each other. And instead of trying to find our way back, you chose to betray everything we built together. With that, I walked out of the kitchen, leaving Candy alone with her thoughts as I packed a bag to stay at a friend's place. I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The road ahead would be tough, but for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of lawyers, paperwork, and dividing up our shared life. True to her word, Candy did not contest anything. I think she realized how close she had come to losing everything and decided to cut her losses. During this time, I stayed with my best friend, Mike. He was shocked when I told him what had happened, but he was incredibly supportive. One night, as we sat on his balcony nursing beers, he asked me a question I had not really considered yet. So, what are you going to do now, man? After the divorce is finalized, I mean. I took a long swig of my beer, contemplating. Honestly, I have no idea. It's like I've been living on autopilot for so long, following this plan Candy and I had for our lives. Now that it's gone, I'm not sure who I am anymore. Mike nodded thoughtfully. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, you know. It's like you've got a clean slate. You can reinvent yourself, do all those things you always talked about but never did because they didn't fit into Candy's grand plan. His words struck a chord. I remembered all the dreams and ambitions I had put on the back burner over the years, always telling myself there would be time later. Well, later was now. You know what, Mike? You're right. Maybe it's time I focused on what I want for a change. As I said those words, I felt a spark of excitement for the first time since this whole ordeal began. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of possibilities. Over the next few months, I threw myself into rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage to Candy. I picked up old hobbies I had abandoned years ago, started playing guitar again, took up hiking on weekends, and even signed up for a cooking class I had always been interested in but never pursued. It was not all smooth sailing, of course. There were nights when the loneliness hit hard, when I would wake up reaching for someone who was not there anymore. But slowly, day by day, I started to feel like myself again, or rather, a new version of myself. One day, about 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Brad at a local coffee shop. My heart rate spiked when I saw him, all the old anger and hurt threatening to bubble up. But to my surprise, he approached me, looking nervous and ashamed. "Mark, I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he stammered. "What happened with Professor Les? I mean, with Candy, it was wrong. I should never have." I cut him off, not really wanting to hear the details. "It's okay, Brad." "Well, it's not okay, but it's in the past now." He nodded, looking relieved. "I also wanted you to know that she's been fired from the university." This caught me off guard. "What? How?" Brad shifted uncomfortably. "Turns out I wasn't the only one. Some other students came forward after rumors started circulating. There was an investigation and, well, yeah." As he walked away, I stood there processing this new information. I thought I would feel vindicated, happy even. But all I felt was a profound sadness for the woman I once loved and relief that this chapter of my life was truly over. The news about Candy's firing left me with mixed emotions. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction that her actions had finally caught up with her, but another part felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Despite everything she had done, I could not help but remember the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. I decided to reach out to her, not out of any desire to reconcile, but to offer closure for both of us. We met at a neutral location, a park we used to frequent in happier times. Candy looked different, older somehow, and worn down. The confident, almost arrogant demeanor she had during our confrontation was gone, replaced by a quiet resignation. "I heard about the university," I said, breaking the awkward silence. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "I suppose I had it coming." We sat there for a while, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. Finally, Candy spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Mark, for everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I am sorry." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in months. I saw regret, shame, and a deep sadness that mirrored my own. "I appreciate that, Candy," I said softly. "I hope you can find a way to move forward from this." As we parted ways, I felt a sense of closure I had not realized I needed. The anger and bitterness I had been carrying started to dissipate, replaced by a tentative hope for the future. In the weeks following my meeting with Candy, I found myself reflecting on our relationship and the lessons I had learned from its painful end. One evening, as I was organizing some old photos, I came across a picture of Candy and me from our wedding day. We looked so happy, so full of hope for the future. It hit me then that I had been idolizing our past, remembering only the good times and ignoring the cracks that had been forming long before I caught her cheating. I realized that while Candy's actions were inexcusable, the failure of our marriage was not solely her fault. I had played a part too, becoming complacent, taking her for granted, and not communicating my own needs and desires effectively. It was a hard pill to swallow, but acknowledging my own role in our relationship's breakdown felt like an important step in my healing process. This revelation prompted me to start seeing a therapist. Madeline, a kind but no-nonsense woman in her 50s, helped me work through my feelings of betrayal, anger, and self-doubt. She also encouraged me to explore what I truly wanted in a partner and a relationship. During one particularly insightful session, Madeline asked, "Mark, if you could go back and give yourself advice at the start of your marriage, what would you say?" I thought about it for a moment before responding. "I'd tell myself to never stop dating my wife, to keep the spark alive, to communicate openly, and to never assume that love is enough without effort from both sides." As I said those words, I felt a sense of clarity I had not experienced in a long time. I was finally ready to close the chapter on my marriage to Candy and open myself up to the possibility of love again, but this time with a much clearer understanding of what it takes to make a relationship work. About a year after the divorce, I felt ready to dip my toes back into the dating pool. My first few attempts were awkward and hesitant, but I gradually regained my confidence. I was surprised to find that being open about my past actually helped. It showed I had lived, learned, and grown from my experiences. One day at a local farmer's market, I quite literally bumped into a woman named Sarah. We got to talking as we both reached for the same bunch of kale, and I found myself captivated by her warmth and quick wit. We exchanged numbers and started dating casually. Sarah was different from Candy in many ways. She was straightforward and honest, with a passion for her work as a pediatric nurse. Our relationship developed slowly, built on a foundation of mutual respect and open communication. I made sure to apply the lessons I had learned, never taking her for granted and always striving to keep our connection strong. As my relationship with Sarah blossomed, I found myself thinking less and less about my past with Candy. The pain and betrayal I had felt faded, replaced by gratitude for the lessons I had learned and the person I had become as a result. One evening, as Sarah and I were cooking dinner together, she asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Do you ever regret your marriage to Candy?" I paused, considering my answer carefully. "I regret the way it ended," I said finally. "I regret the pain we caused each other, but I don't regret the marriage itself. It taught me so much about love, about myself, and about what I want in a relationship. In a way, it led me to you." Sarah smiled, squeezing my hand. "I'm glad you see it that way. Your past is part of who you are, and I love who you are now." I felt a surge of happiness and hope for the future. I realized that my experience with Candy, as painful as it had been, had shaped me into someone capable of building a healthier, stronger relationship. Looking back on everything that happened, I can say with certainty that while infidelity is a devastating betrayal, it does not have to be the end of your story. It is possible to heal, to grow, and to love again. For those who might find themselves in a similar situation, here is what I learned. Trust your instincts. If something feels off in your relationship, don't ignore it. Communication is key. Always strive for open, honest dialogue with your partner. Never stop working on your relationship. Love requires constant effort and nurturing. If betrayal occurs, allow yourself to feel the pain, but do not let it consume you. Seek professional help if needed. Therapy can be incredibly beneficial in processing your emotions. Learn from the experience. Use it as an opportunity for self-reflection and growth. Don't rush into a new relationship until you have healed and learned from the past. Remember that you deserve love and respect. Never settle for less. Infidelity shattered my world, but it also gave me the opportunity to rebuild myself into a stronger, wiser person. While I would not wish this experience on anyone, I am grateful for the lessons it taught me and the path it ultimately led me down. There is life after betrayal, and it can be beautiful if you allow yourself to heal and grow.